All right, everyone. Oh, I'm adding people here. There we go. All right, everyone, let's get started. And welcome to this session on how to run an elite product organization in 2021. With me here today is Becky Flint, who is a technology executive based in Silicon Valley. She has built and scaled product and engineering organizations globally for both startups and Fortune 500 companies. I'm very excited to learn more from her, and because she's taken her understanding of how to run program management at all these companies and created a product called Dragon Boat, which helps people with strategic product portfolio for leaders to align strategies, execution, deliver near-term and long-term results. So I'm very excited. Her experience includes executive roles at Feedzai, BigCommerce, Shutterfly, and PayPal. And she's managed more than 10 million hours of products. So, 10,000 hours is nothing compared to her experience here. So I'm excited to get started. Let's start with this question. Becky, what is an elite product organization?
Well, first of all, thank you, Connie. That's a very kind intro. I got embarrassed a little bit. But it's interesting that I'm the black sheep in the group of product managers because I've been in program management role more than product management role. But obviously working with a lot of product managers and other than being one of them for a while. So my observation of an elite product organization is a little bit different from being an elite product manager. Right? Think about the product organization. It's like, a race team or basketball team where a product manager can be a runner, right? And these two things goes a little bit differently. And the elite organization exists, product organization exists in the end, fulfill one of the key things, which is building product. And it sounds like a kind of obvious, but the difference is that a company does only two things actually. A company does only two things. Build product, build something, and sell something. So the whole building part has all the elements of pieces. So you have a great product manager individually, and you have the team of product managers, and then how they work together in the ecosystem and how they react internally, externally. So these pieces are coming together. You would build a product that not only achieve what your customer needs and wants, achieve the business value you needs and wants, and stay in competitive, and how you adjust and dial up and down along the way. That is the key differentiator of being an elite product team that separate from have a best experience, best business outcome, or best technologist, and so forth.
Right. What have you seen in terms of building blocks of a team like that? What are all the people involved in creating this elite team?
Right, it's actually a very good question. And going back to the analogy I had earlier about let's say you're a race car team, right? You get drivers, and you get the people, the pit crews, and then you have mechanics. You can have the technicians, and so forth, right? If you think about a elite product teams, first of all, you will have the really good people talent. You have product managers, you have the designers, and then you have the technologist, right? So that people talent is really important. The second part, the skill set of that, is product craft. I think all of you as product managers are very familiar with the product craft. The user research, market research, experience, A/B testing, product analytics, all the things in terms of building a really good product. There are two more things that doesn't seem very obvious, but in my experience has really differentiated a product organization versus an elite product organization. So these two ingredients I called product portfolio craft, so PPM craft. We can go down a little bit more talking about the PPM craft and different elements of that. And then the other part of that is the cadence. So if you can imagine, there are 4 building blocks. Well, maybe I can share just a screenshot of that so that I can get a little bit of visual.
Sure.
If you look at this, kind of like, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
So think about these pieces. So we will have to have the people coming in to build the product. And you will have the product craft, which, the skills in building product and customer and stuff. And the portfolio craft is holding the pieces together so that you have all the supporting functions and supporting pieces in addition to the product and product skills. And then finally, it's how you're moving the trend forward. So that's like the key ingredients of product craft, that if we have one piece not there, it's hard to keep everything together.
Fantastic. So at Product Maestro, we are storytellers. So I want to ask you if you have a story to share with us about a team that is elite and what that felt like. And then afterwards, share with us a story about a team that wasn't so elite and what that felt like.
Okay, cool. That's awesome story you asked. So I would say professionally grew up at PayPal. I joined PayPal a long time ago, and it was a pretty young company. At that time, we were also part of eBay. So there's something very interesting about how these two companies operates at a bigger scale of building product, if you will. PayPal has an amazing product manager group that almost every single PMs I interact with are super smart and great. And same thing on eBay. Mm-hmm. Great product managers, super smart, and amazing to interact with. What is uniquely different is that eBay PMs are very metrics driven, very customer driven, very data driven. Okay. So that they would say, okay, here's our customer onboarding, here's our penetration, here's our average basket size. They have these goals, growth and conversion, all that stuff. It's great, and the eBay keep expanding, doing really well. PayPal PMs are also very metrics driven. They will look at expansion and conversion and managing costs, but PayPal also has the dreaming part of things. So that when PayPal and eBay working together, that, obviously we were working on big part of the revenue came from eBay, and then we were trying to penetrate eBay growth. So that go from, 70% to 75%, so on, because it's a huge market, you make a lot of money. But PayPal product team also say, look, for every merchant on eBay, there are hundreds of them not on eBay. And these guys just need the same thing. We should go after them. And eBay said, well, there's no ROI. You're going to spend so much returns. And plus, if you go after them, they will not get onto eBay. Therefore, we lose a bigger margin for the company as a whole. Makes a lot of sense, right? But PayPal said, well, there's a big market. There's a big opportunity. We need to invest in and see whether they want and whether there is something. Long story short, I fast forward so many years later, back in the days, eBay account for maybe 90% of the PayPal's revenue. And PayPal was 3% of the market share of SMB online payment. Today, eBay accounts for maybe 5-10% of the PayPal revenue. And the SMB payments accounts for 90% of the PayPal revenue. So the story is that as a lead product management group or organization, you look today and you look at future. You look at the customer you have it today, and you look at the customers you don't have today. If you really focus on, metrics and in some ways OKRs and so on and so forth, that actually is great for now, may not lead to the future expansion.
Right. So what I'm getting is there's this dreamer DNA that needs to be in the team, but at a reasonable level, right? Because if you have too much of that, then nothing gets done. Right. But the teams tend to err on the side of figuring out what's happening today, the fires that are coming in, the, tactical stuff, and forget a bit about, and to be honest, it's really hard. I've been in product for a long time. It's very hard. You have dreamers. Usually the CEO comes in and drops a ball and be like, where's this thing that I've wanted since I started this company? Right. And then you're like, well, we have priorities that need to get handled today. I mean, we have a stack of customer service tickets. We have a bunch of tech backlog. And then, of course, we have these incremental iterative features that everybody's asking for and beating down our doors for, right? So I totally get that point. But I think the craft of doing the dreamer part, right? Like the execution of the dreamer part is actually really challenging. So I'd love to hear more. You talked about portfolio product management earlier. Is that the secret sauce for how you take dreams and make them real?
It's actually a very good point, Connie. And one of the things where, like every organization and even the macro movement from time to time, is that I've been around for a while. So when I started in tech, it was waterfall. So someone determined 3-year vision, 1-year plan, and everyone just go crank it down and then go execute, right? They call it portfolio project management because that's a waterfall.
Sure.
And then Agile happened. And what happens is you have this team and they innovate, they were, work on the feedbacks and customers. But what happens is that the way we think is a product team, right? And, I have my product, my areas, and so on and so forth. From a customer's perspective, it is just one product. You think about Google search. Nobody thinks Google search is 3,000 products, right? How many product managers you have inside a Google search? So the point is that no matter how big or small you are as a product organization, even if you think you only have one product, Google search, you are having a portfolio. A product portfolio means that you have the context of portfolio here is taking more from the finance, right? So in the finance world, you have your retirement portfolio. You slice and dice your retirement portfolio in different ways. Essentially is a portfolio of opportunities you can go after, right? The portfolio of opportunity is a secret sauce to build an elite product team, because we cannot do everything. We cannot just do one thing. We cannot say new customer acquisition is more important than tech debt, right? Or retention is more important than new customer acquisition, right? So how do we decide all of these pieces? That means we cannot peanut butter. We know what happens when you peanut butter, right? The whole memo about the peanut butter at Yahoo, you can look it up. But what that means is that...
Now I'm curious.
Really?
Peanut butter.
The peanut butter strategy. The peanut butter strategy is that if you cannot decide, everyone gets something. And, to be honest, if I will be blunt, most of the companies today, either if you run Agile, you run pod, and you don't make adjustment along the way, you're basically peanut buttering. You have 5 pods, 10 pods, 200 pods. And
you spread it everywhere. That's the peanut butter.
There's no change, right? It's but then you are losing on things that are, maybe you just launched a new product. Your focus is to acquire customers so you can take more market share, right? And then the next quarter, next 6 months, you say, well, I got a lot of customers, and they're churning, because there are, product features, gaps, and things like that. So now, instead of spend 80% of your resources on new customer acquisition, you spend maybe 20% on that, maybe 0% on that. And you spend a majority of your resources on retention features, right? And next thing you know, our platform is fall apart because we acquire so many customers, they didn't churn, and the platform can't handle it because that's a champagne problem. It's still a problem, right? So now you would say, let's invest more mind share and the resources and to that tech platform issues and innovation. For example, the dreamers, right? When we at PayPal did the off eBay, we call it, it's a merchant group. It was just 2 teams. It's a very small 10% of the resource pool, right? And that allow you to just dial up and down. PayPal lost, made other bets that didn't work out, but they didn't just say, let's, it's really like you invest like a little VC in your company. Right. You invest in these areas that has potential, still data driven, right? And when you invest in these areas, And if you see growth, you see metrics that make sense, then you go to say, you know what, we can put a little bit more and see where it goes.
Right. I love the analogy of the financial portfolio, because everybody understands, oh, you want to diversify your risk, so you have a number of different investments. But one thing you said earlier was interesting. The peanut butter strategy is still a diversified strategy, but it's a flat diversification, right? It's like saying, I have 10 buckets, everybody gets 1/10 of the money.
Right.
But what you're saying is it needs to look more like a wave, where over time it actually shifts. So each bucket gets a different allocation. How often do you update that allocation? And what happens like on the ground, right? When teams get their funding pulled, it creates a lot of anxiety and churn and right. So how often do you make the shift, and then how do you manage your way into and out of that shift?
That's a very good question. So there are actually 3 questions. So I want to just double click on them. The first question is a peanut butter strategy a good strategy or not? I would say it's better than not having diversification, right? But it's also think about every portfolio, the success of the portfolio. The outcome of the portfolio, it's not that important by the individual picking. It's more important on how you allocate. If you go talk to a financial advisor, that's sort of the key point, right? Because just like individually, how often you adjust your financial portfolio, it's based on like you before your college, or college grads versus having kids near retirement age, you change that all the time. And the same thing for product, and that we call it responsive. So it responsive meaning we don't really know how this set of the product features gonna result in what we want it to get to, right? We have a hypothesis. We think it's going to drive revenue. We think it's going to drive sign up. So we have to have the metrics there. And we would say, hey, we're going to invest, let's say 2 teams working on driving revenue or driving sign up. And then we're checking on that. And, in the back in the day.
What's the cadence there? How often are you checking?
It's a very good question. It depends on the business. So back in the days was a 3-year strategy, 1-year execution. Today, it's something more like, depend on how frequently, how fast you can measure the output, right? If you can measure the outcome very quickly, you adjust that almost like several weeks or, quarter at a time. If it takes longer to see the effect, then you may want to have the longer period. Most of the companies I've seen so far is that, you have sort of annual strategy or annual vision. You have either quarterly or maybe 2-month also of a check-in, right? And then you obviously you have your typical sprints, so that each step of the way, you would look and say, do we achieve what we wanted to achieve, and then where we are going in the direction we want to go, and then you can make adjustment to that. So that's the frequency.
Okay. So in 2 months you check your numbers. There are some numbers, leading indicators is fine. You can get those numbers pretty quickly, but there are some lagging indicators, right? Sometimes you need that lagging indicator to be your metric. How do you manage that? Because I'm running, I shipped it in 2 months, I'm checking, but that number is actually not ripe yet. And I don't know till 6 months. So do I keep investing or do I not?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I wanted just to go pause for a second and give you an example. That's like, I think that most of the people today, if you talk about prioritization, there are always some sort of scoring, right? The scores, the traditional ones are ROIs, and today you have the impact, reach, right scores or otherwise. And these scoring used for prioritization is actually very challenging to say whether I achieve the outcomes or not. So think about that your outcome and the impact is probably more important in terms of metrics. Now to your question, so if we do something like NPS, it will take a while and it's not inclusive, right? So we cannot just keep investing until that seed, then we could be over investing. So the idea is that we have a hypothesis, then we have a way to keep track on that hypothesis. We did something, we think in 2, 3, 6 months, we will see impact. Then you pause, you work on other more pressing and important and the value creating thing. And then in 2, 3, 6 months, that if you can see there's moving, great. If not, you work on that. so that because it's not immediate, it's not like your financial portfolio, you put something, even your financial portfolio, even though you buy something, it go up or down in value, you still want to see what is the 6 month, cadence. So sort of the quarterly cadence somehow just works out that, I remember, so people call it seasons, right? So you think about it, it's almost like a business somehow figure out a way to operate in a quarterly season, like quarterly report in the financial words and all that stuff. So that quarter seems to, from company to company, it seems to be a good cadence for at least a good sized company. Smaller companies can faster, you can go monthly, for example.
Got it. So it seems like you plant the seed for the ones where you can't check the result yet. The tree just grows slower. So you plant the seed and then you don't keep doing anything else. Right. You come back and check on the tree when it's ripe, and then you invest again from that point on. Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What do you do with the team though, right? Because the team, like, they're working on project A and you're only investing 1 month in project A, and then they're supposed to wait for the tree to actually grow and see if it comes out, right? What happens after the 1 month? You put them on a different project, or?
Right. So it's a very good question. So what happens is that we can look at two school of thoughts. And some of you are more familiar with the Spotify model. The team's actually more fluid, right? So they, especially look at the newer ones, they actually move from mission to mission, so that you work on something and it's somewhat wrapped up and at least a pause, and then you can move on to the next mission that's mostly driving the outcome. So the team actually moves more, not like, you tear the team apart, but mostly it's like the team itself kind of follow where the most important outcome, that output or outcome they can drive. The other one is a very interesting school of thoughts. I don't know all of you are interested in that or not, is that we've done that. So we've done that, for example, at BigCommerce. What we did was we had pairs that would just move, that even though we have a team that could 2 pairs or 3 pairs, that's like 4 or 6 people. What happens is that when you work as a team together for a while, it's contrary to some of the beliefs that, hey, you have a stable team, you know how you work well together, that you should stay together. And there's another school of thought say, hey, you need to break up team every once in a while, so that not completely break up into individuals. So in that case, at BigCommerce, we did like a pair. So you still get 2 people work together for a while. What that happens is that you created new. Whenever you have the storming norming phase, you actually create a new way of thinking, and then you bring energy to a team that, when you get into the clockwork, that also tells you kind of miss a little bit of the dreaming, the spark, because you kind of have to have that storming to have that spark. So now again, not everyone has a control on how your team potentially can work. But at BigCommerce, when we made that kind of model pairs, and sometimes we pair people, so these 2 pairs could work in different initiatives moving over time, it seems to be more helpful. People get to do different things. They have new perspectives. They still can bounce ideas with each other, not just completely new. So that seems to be a very good balance.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because innovation is happening at the intersection of worlds. So whenever, food, for example, food innovation comes when you have culture A and culture B. They visit each other, and now, the West is using soy sauce and the East is using cheese, right? So then you have these new cuisines. And that's how you create this innovation. So what you're saying about having this built-in kind of mix and match of the teams can really spark that new thinking. We, in one of the teams I worked in, we did that too. But we hit a point where it became an exhaustion for the engineering. So I think there's a balance, right? Where they were just, too much change. I'm learning new stacks all the time. Their efficiency went down. Right. And there is a happy path of like, hey, we're on track doing this for a while. You get used to relationships and kind of get really efficient with it. Right. And then at some point you break it up a little bit and kind of shake things up. But it does slow things down. So how do you balance it? Like, you're nodding. So like, what is the balance you've seen that works well?
Right. So first of all, the frequency is very important. You don't want to do it faster than a quarter, usually 2 or 3 quarters. So that in most cases, the people settle in to do something, then they learn the area for a while. So that's one frequency. The other one was, I borrowed a term that one of the VP of engineering I used to work with. The way he described it is that you can bring the team to work or you can bring the work to team. Meaning that you can not break up, right? Instead of the 3 pairs and working together, maybe you can have 2 pairs working together and get another pair come over here, or they take 1 pair to another area that needs more work, right? Needs more resources to achieve certain goals. So that's called like bring the team to work. The other one is to bring work to team. You have the same team, but you're going to work on different things. So that you also create something new and excitement. And sometimes you have teams been working together for a while. They have really good synergy. They really don't want to be broken up, but they are ready for something new. So we bring new things to them, bring work to them. Sometimes the team work together for a while, and then they kind of like, we want to work with others, want to figure out what's going on or other things. Then you can bring them up, and you bring the team to work. You bring them to another team. So you can balance depends on the needs.
I see. So you're advocating both. Both of them are good strategies.
Right.
Okay. We talk a lot about larger companies, but I understand that the portfolio product management also applies even in a startup, even if you're one product manager, right? This is a mindset that can help. So can you talk through, like, with an example of Acme widgets, right? Or whatever real example you want to use. If I'm product manager of that one Acme widget, what is my portfolio? I have one widget.
Right. So there are a couple of things. The portfolio is the concept of the choices, right? How you categorize the product scope into different categories. So one of the ways to look at that is like, hey, do we want to focus on new customers because they're struggling with our product? They don't know how to use it. It's complicated. The onboarding sucks and all that, right? So then you move your investment, your resources, basically your product features and investment, all of them around making the onboarding work great. The second part is, your existing customers, right? Your existing customers could be something that, the feature has feature gaps, the widget is not lined up correctly, and so on and so forth, so that you are focusing on that. The other part of that is a lot of times even the same product, you have different use cases. So instead of selling to individuals, I can sell white label it. I can sell to partners. I can go to a different market expansion, right? So that's the extension of your same product. So that's like from a pure product perspective. The other part of that is your OKRs. So every one of us here, we're responsible for more than one goal, right? It's more like, obviously company needs to grow, but we have a lot of other goals. So where the OKRs need to be done through activities that work, right? Product feature works or education or support and all the other stuff. So where do you find your time and support one objective versus the other? And your time support your own objective versus someone else's objectives. And I want to just double click on this. It's really important that, obviously OKRs have become hugely popular today and everyone's talking about it. There are 2 dangers that we have to be aware so then we can build the product around it. One of the first danger is OKR tend to be very short-term tactical if we don't build it right. So it's important to make sure when we look at our OKRs that covers both tangible short-term quarterly or 6-month objectives, also things that allow us to innovate and then stay ahead of the curve for our product. Otherwise, I'm not going to use kind of go back to eBay, PayPal example, right? That's kind of like leading to different outcomes. That's the one part of OKR. The second part of OKR is to think about how much your OKR is shared, your objectives is shared versus is lined up to individual teams. So on our blog, on dragonmode.io/blog, if you look for something, there's a blog saying, is your OKR blocking, hurting your innovation? What that means is sometimes a company implement OKR, they have CEO in OKR, and then you have like a VP OKR, and then you have product OKR. They basically break down. So when you break down your objectives into different areas, there are two problems happen. One is every team gonna have a smaller sets of goals that limit you to think big, right? If I would go directly to the top goals, maybe I have a different approach versus my goal. If we're gonna go revenue, I'm gonna go sales, and then we're gonna hire salespeople, and then your goal is to hire 3 salespeople. That's like, there are other ways to do it, right? So, I'm just using extreme example, which actually.
So what should it be? Instead of hire 3 salespeople, what should that goal be written as?
Right. So that's where when you create department goals, not losing context of a higher level goals is very different, right? So that's why we need to say our goal is to grow. Our goal is to grow revenue. And then we have lined up our strategies across the board. So OKR does not explicitly say what is our strategies. That's where we need to really align on that. So that's let me see if I can go find that image. Okay, I don't have it. So there was an image, I'll send it as part of this follow-up, that was actually coming from Spotify. That's something we experienced at PayPal a long time ago, so we kind of fixed it, which was that if you think about a company's OKR, mostly are very similar: grow revenue, retain customers, build the best product in the world, and so forth. There's almost no difference, right? And the difference is that if we decide on how we get there, it's how we differentiate a company. But we don't always spend a whole lot of time to say how we get there, right? So we say we grow revenue, and everyone think about the best way in my area to grow revenue. And that didn't really give us ability to say holistically as all of us, what are the ideas we can go? So when you define your strategy, and then you start, the strategy changes, right? But the strategy.
What was the strategy? Can you give us an example of the?
Okay, very good question. So using example in one of the company I worked at, I'm not gonna name the names, and we want to double our revenue from 40 to 80. It's pretty aggressive, right? And we think we can do, except that the sales team says that we are going to, we're gonna go to new market. We sell something, use our existing technology, we build some solutions, it's close enough, we can, that's a big market, we can sell a lot more, right? And then there's the partner team say, no, we have good enough product, we just need to white label it, and then we can sell it, right? And then the product team said, we need to build solutions. So the solution sells to banks, solution sells to, the retailers and so on and so forth. So what happened was that this is a very interesting conversation, right?
And they went and did those 3 different things, basically.
Because before I came, the company wasn't able to go to places. I'm not saying I'm the only one made the change, right? But what I did was bring everyone on the same page of how are you going to go double our revenue, and realize that everyone has different opinions and all of them require product work, right? So you're going to white label something, you're going to do your product, right? You're going to go to a new market, you're going to build product. You want to do solution, you do product. And then they go to individual product groups to say, can you do this? The product say, yeah, it's a good idea, we do. So then you have a 6 product group does different things, and then you can't achieve any one of them in, let's say, 1 quarter, right? So what we did was instead it was say, where are we, our product? So we kind of use the S-curve thing, right? So where are we in our existing product? Is it time for the S-curve for the new product yet or not? And we found out nobody's in agreement on where we are, even on that. So we decided on where we are on the S-curve. Then we said, if we decide on what's on the S-curve, that's easier to help us say how much you're going to invest in existing product, which is 80% of that. And how much you will invest in, you go to new market, adjacent market, build a completely new product, right? So that really helped us to say where we are going to focus on. Then we actually can achieve. So first year we, achieved the area for the core product. We also found out the nuggets of the things that we can go for the new market. The next year we went there, and that was much better than the last 3 years we couldn't.
Right. So sales wanted to go after new stuff. Partners wanted to just double down on what's there. And then product wanted to make some iterative changes, right?
Right.
So then in order to break up that wrestling match, you go back to, okay, what is our investment? And you're like 80% in current and 20% in future. So that provided the guideline for, okay, well, if it's 80% current, then the partner strategy, right, and the product strategy is primarily dominant.
Right.
And then you have a little bit of like, okay, well, sales wants to play, so we'll let them play. We'll give them one team, and off you go, right?
Right.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, let's take some questions from the audience here. Teresa asked a question, and she wants to know, with so many products shifting to subscription and cloud, how does customer success and adoption fit into the product organization?
Super good question. This is something a lot of companies still trying to figure out. Customer success is, so from my experience, has been always integral part of the product, especially around inputs to existing customers. And some of them also drive to new customers. And so there's, I would say, almost a three part of it. One part of that is to have a cadence of how do we collect the customer feedback and the needs information into its standalone category. And then we can categorize standalone repository, and then we categorize them such so that they can be aligned to some of the product themes that a product organization would have. So then you can build that into your roadmap process to see how much of that could fit into the category.
Right.
And similarly to we kind of touched upon earlier, that you'll have existing customers, new customer, and maybe different personas, a segment of the customers. And if you tag your customer feedback and insight into these category, then you can bake them into your product planning process, which means customer success is a very, very close partnership with the product organization. It's almost like extension, right? So extension in terms of getting the insight and first-hand experience into product. And a funny story that one of the things that I learned from the head of the product at PayPal, Amy Clement, now she runs for Amadeus Fund. And she required every single product manager, when you join the company, go to Omaha, that's where the customer support center, to be there for 2 weeks.
The phones. Yeah.
Right. And then every time you have a release for big features, product manager are required to go there to train the agents. And
do they send their engineers there? Because that's what we need to do.
That's a very good question. We should do that as well, I think, but they definitely send the PMs there. I think all the engineering managers do, all the tech leaders, they do.
Okay, that's great.
That as well, because it's very easy to forget about customers over time because we're just so busy. So to your question, customer success is a very integral part of the product input process, and also, interaction in terms of demos and ideas, and before you even build a product, right? So that's like a part of that, and the tagging and categorizing as well.
Right. You're saying that you would give them a dedicated track, like in your portfolio, you would say this is the customer support kind of allocation, or are they sort of horizontal across multiple tracks?
They're horizontal across multiple tracks.
Okay.
So the way what you may want to think about is that you have the same definition of categorization between product and customer success. So when they start to get the customer feedbacks, they will categorize,
tag them in
the
their
same way as your product. So then when you say, okay, we're going to work on, onboarding for SMB, and then you can pull all the onboarding SMB part of the input along with all the other product elements, right? So then you can figure out how I'm going to go fulfill my 20% of allocation on onboarding SMB product roadmap.
And how you're going to justify to your engineering leader that we're building this really hard thing, because here's a list of all the customers that want it here.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly. Yeah.
When I led a product team at a health tech startup, I actually had the support team reporting to me too.
Right.
And when I talked to a VC, she was really impressed. She was like, "Oh, that makes a ton of sense." And she was a product leader too. So it just suddenly like this light bulb lit up, and it was a bit accidental actually. It was just like, hey, who has experience doing support? Connie, okay, you got you're on that team,
right?
And it actually made a ton of sense. It was great because me and the customer support lead, like we created systems like what you described, right? How do you tie all the feedback in? She was in all the product meetings. She felt like she had a say because product customer support people just feel like they're left in the cold all the time, right? They're the people. Right. They're the people on shift 24 hours to answer angry customer calls, and then when they need to fix something, they can't fix anything. Right. So then they just have to keep kind of tap dancing, which really sucks. Really sucks. So having a voice in the room, inviting them to the product meetings, giving them a channel to share, like they have so much to share, just so much. Incredible to tap into that.
Right.
Okay. Wada, I hope I said your name right. Wada is asking a peanut butter question. So how do you balance the peanut butter strategy with time to market and focus on execution? The challenge that he sees is that every feature becomes equally important, which then ties engineering hands in allocating resources.
Okay. This is a very good question. I want to touch on two elements of that. So it is very difficult to do a linear prioritization. And so still go back to, because everyone knows PayPal, just using PayPal. It's also older, so it's no longer trade secret, right? When we have features to competing for resources, always resource contention all the time, what happens is that there are features that you do, it's literally, changes small thing, 2 weeks of effort, they created millions of dollars as business value for eBay. Because we're on eBay, then it's just a big market. And then there are also features that we work on that create hardly anything, right? If you're gonna go to Brazil, like how big is the Brazil market back in the days, right? Or like, to credit. And then today it's our $1 billion business. And it's very hard to compare apple to orange. You gotta use whatever prioritization models, the reach, impact, whatnot, right? Important stuff. So what happened is, first of all, is allocation. You categorize by goals, you categorize by themes, you categorize by investment horizon, however you want to do. You may want to do multiple. You want to have your product portfolio categorized by goals. You want to have your product portfolio categorized as your business product segments, right? Customer segments. You also want to, look at the horizon, right? So it's going to be innovation, it's a cash cow, or it's going to be, self-sustaining, not kill self thing. And then once you decide on allocation, then it's a little bit easier. So then let's say I have 50% of allocation on cash cow growth, because we need to sustain a runway to, fund the innovation. So
that seems super high for cash cow.
Right? So then you, in that cash cow allocation, you can prioritize it within them, because it's an apple to apple comparison, right? It's what is the metric you're going to use? What's the amount of the resources you're going to use? You can use the right score and all the other linear prioritization. It would work because you compared apple to apple. Then don't touch my other categories of things, because, innovation or whatnot, ideally, right? Unless there's a crisis happen, you can change your allocation. So then within that other bucket, you can also compare apple to apple. Maybe the metrics is no longer, it's a different metric. We're not talking about, market size anymore. Maybe we talk about the user adoption rate for innovation product, how fast people adopt that feature, right? Or even the feedback. You can have a very different metrics and compare these different type of, in the same category, and compare the differences. So that when you go for resource contention, first of all, you look at allocation. Are we within our allocation? And then fighting for allocation is a PM job. Product, that's the leader in product management. Leadership in product management is, what is our goal? How we get there? And what is our willingness to allocate a certain amount? Once you decide on that, and the other thing is you can work with your team. But if you don't get your leadership buy-in on allocation and goals, it's much harder when you have two product managers compete for the same resources.
Yeah, agreed. The stakeholder buy-in is what we work on, what I work on with my students. It's hard. It's almost like you do this part where you prioritize, and then you're like, okay, this is the right way, and then trying to get everybody to agree with that is its own piece of work. So
right.
Yeah. No, I agree though. Getting it planned out that way is very important.
Right.
One more question from the group here. To address the peanut butter situation, this is from Teresa. Do you recommend some weighing strategies, such as weighted shortest job first? Yeah, and I think overall, like, what are some prioritization frameworks that you've used and have been helpful?
It's a very funny, that definitely evolves depending on your audience even, right? So when you talk to finance, you talk to business leaders, quite often they will talk about the financials. What's the ROI for this? What's the, net present value of this, and so on and so forth. When you start ROI or NPV, right?
Yeah.
And then as we start to talk about innovation, becomes something very different. And so we have to have a different model. So we talk about metrics such as, the adoption rate, how fast their adoption, what is a big market. So you actually create custom, sometimes you create custom framework. And the simplest one is something more like, hey, effort, benefit. RISE score is definitely something we use.
Nice.
I think the funny thing is that I think a quantitative prioritization is more popular these days than it used to be. I definitely would say that, especially on the metrics way. I think the shortest time for the jobs, or this people, can it be done, and can people use it, and that kind of model, or it's a strategic, it's urgent, and I think all this model works a lot better within PMs themselves. It's harder to get understanding and stakeholder to see what it is. So we typically will translate into something that this is our goal. This is the one that contributes to the most to the goal based on the effort it will take. So then they can easily use the ROI, but we don't use ROI as the money. We use ROI in terms of driving metric. And in fact, that's how something we come up with called the metric over available resources. We will say, use 2 engineers for the quarter, we will move this metric by 80%, right? And then then people say, okay, this is 2 engineers drive 80%, you get a 40 of the metric over available resources, versus the other one, you can move metrics by 20 with 1 engineer. So the 20 over 1 may not be as desirable versus the 80 over 2.
Okay, so you've tried RISE, you've tried all these different frameworks out there. You're saying each company kind of picks off the shelf, but then actually make their own. Nobody's actually using RISE out of the box. And then you created for Dragon Boat is this MOAR, MOAR framework, right?
Right.
I see. And have you seen customers adopting that framework directly, or are they also mixing and matching?
I think there's both. So what happens is that we saw people do both. In that product teams themselves, they do more. RISE is one of the common ones. But the MOAR is the ones they use across the portfolio. Because when you explain RISE to anyone on the product team, it's very hard for them to understand. And then they start to pick and then argue about the reach, and they pick and argue about impact, and it become very distracting, especially if you give them a score. The score is blended, right? So then you say, what is in this score? How do you come up with this score? And then it's get a lot more conversation. But some teams, some more mature product organization, the stakeholders get trained to know RISE, and then they will say, okay, the RISE score is 80, 20, 50. And then they kind of just take it as ROI. But for the newer organization, not at the level of maturity that it drives more conversation. So if I were to say anything, the learning is that it depends on the level of maturity. You can use it incrementally. You can use it for yourself, that helpful, right? And then you use it to think about how do you educate your audience, and then customize yours if you need. But the MOAR is very easy for stakeholder to understand, because it's very similar to ROI, except we don't translate dollars for engineer resources. We just say 2 engineers, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and then 8 weeks. So then it's very tangible on what do you need to get what you need to get to.
Right. So RISE and similar frameworks you recommend keeping inside the product team, because there's a lot of learning that needs to happen to understand what that number means.
Right.
But MOAR, you would use outside, like with your stakeholders as well.
Right, because they care about how many engineers you have, how much resources you have for that to do all the things that we do.
Right. So do you use both, or do you just pick one of those?
Depends on the desire. If for product manager, yourself, you say, hey, I want to have another thinking before I come out with a MOAR score, because the metric itself can be related to that, then you use both. Sometimes you have a pretty good idea, you don't really need to lay it out, then you just directly use one. So it's like ROI. Is the ROI sufficient? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how much you feel you need it.
Right. Great. We've got about 8 minutes left. If anybody wants to ask a question, please feel free to type it into the chat box at this point. Your chance to interact live with Becky here, so I'll keep a lookout. In the meantime, I want to know what is the timing. So we talked about PPM, we talked about like this portfolio approach, this kind of way of thinking. Assuming that your organization isn't there yet, what is the right timing for bringing this to the executive team or to your teams? You know, how do I make the case that, hey, we need to think about the product differently and in terms more like a portfolio? How do I approach that conversation?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think you are already kind of doing that. You may not put a word around it, but you are already doing that. As every product manager job, the number one priority is to prioritize correctly, right? You know, obviously there's all the other pieces, the experience and whatnot, but one of the most important thing is to prioritize the right thing to build. And in order for you to prioritize, you do have to align to customer, align to business goals, align to the near-term and the long-term product vision. So as you balance all that, you already think about that. You just not, I would say responsible portfolio product management is a thought process that good product managers do every single day.
Right.
But it's not laying on quote unquote paper, so that people are not as experienced, not familiar with the product. They don't know how you come out to this prioritization, why you do A versus B. Why is this one more important than the others? You have to explain to them a lot, right? So that the responsible portfolio product management is to say, here are our objectives, 6 of them or 5 of them, whatever, right? Everyone agrees. And then you say, here's our, initiatives go to these objectives, right? And then here's how we allocate our resources, which is how we prioritize the product features. And all of a sudden become a very clear, it's right there on paper, right? Our objectives, these are the things that we're working on. These are for longer term, these for our short term, these for our existing customers, these for our new customer, these for, market expansion. When you lay that on paper, spreadsheets or a tool like a Dragon Boat, you can think better. And you make better decisions, right? So then you can also easily create the buy-in by your stakeholders without being, to be honest, the product managers never have you never make a good enough decision, because people always bang on our doors and why you do this, not this, how about this, why it's not that. But when you lay on paper, nobody can argue, right? Just like if I have this much money in my bank account, and here's how I plan to use it to pay my rent, to pay food, to pay whatever. And you say, okay, I guess that makes sense. We need more resources, right? And that's where responsible portfolio product management is like, take your prioritization thought process in your mind and lay it out on the tool, right? So that you can say, here is how we allocate it across our product objectives. And then you flip around, look at another view. Remember, we're running a multi-dimensional portfolio, right? Then you flip around to have another view, say, here is how we allocate to our customer segments. And then you do another view and say, here's how we invest in today and the future and the survival. So then you can have all this multi-dimensional view of your portfolio, which is a selection of investment choices. And when you do that, you think better and your stakeholder going to be bought in by you. And that's where an elite product organization is that you as a star and your team as a star and you would work with the others well in that you have your best experience, right? You have best people, you have best skills on product management. You also achieve the near term results, the OKRs and whatnot, and the long term vision. You take care of your existing customer, your future customers, right? So you tie all that together.
Yep. So you're saying, look, you're already doing the job, and this is actually an augmentation to the current. So it's not a change management exercise here. It's more crystallizing your own communication as a product manager, being a better storyteller about why you're doing what you're doing, why you're prioritizing the way you're prioritizing. And then by doing that, it immediately helps your job. And it also then builds this culture, organically builds this culture with everybody else to think in this way.
Right.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Looks like we're close to wrap here. You have a special offer for those attending this session. So can you share that with us?
Yes. So can anyone see my screen?
Yes.
So we kind of touch upon this a little bit. Just very quickly, we know, PMs are in the middle in most cases. So you work with the executives, you work with your teams, and tie these pieces together is essential for the success of a product organization. And that also means, as a PM, you need your tool stack. You need your strategic tool stack in addition to your team's tool stack, and tying them together so you can make the good decision and tell your story of why you build what you're building, and how would it impact your business, how it impact your customer. And that's what we're trying to do in DragonBoat. We will elevate your product organization by having that tool stack so that you can create a responsive product portfolio and elevate your product organization. And this, with that, we have 50% off for DragonBoat, which is the product built upon this. And you put the elite at the sign up, and you will automatically get it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your advice on how to run a elite product organization. And hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks to all the participants as well. If you missed any part of it, we will be sending out a video recording.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.